All right, so, we're good?
Yep.
All right,
I swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
It's good to have you back.
It is good to be back.
Yeah.
The reunion is sad for me, but it also has joy. And the sadness is that I won't see these men ever, maybe, because we come from all parts of the country.
Well, there's an end has to come to everything. I think we were very fortunate to have it as long as we did.
How long do you keep it going? You know, do you keep it going to the last tour alive?
I'm very happy to see so many people did come out. All those that could came. Some notable ones, unfortunately, didn't have enough strength in their old bones to get here.
I'm amazed. He says these guys come in, they have a cane or they have a wheelchair, and they're pale, they're gray. And they're here 2 days or 3 days. And when they go home, their faces have color. Some of them aren't using their wheelchair. Some of them are not using their canes. He says they're like different men.
It's what we pass on. You know, history books are one thing, but most people learn things from an oral history. The mortar between the bricks.
After World War II, James Boats Newberry spent his years locating and reconnecting with his fellow PT boaters. In 1964, he visited the Naval Museum and found no patrol torpedo boat display. He quickly rallied his PT boat brethren, and the following year held his first reunion. Boats now had dreams of opening a museum, and one day, if he could find one, restoring an authentic PT boat from World War II.
He started this organization, and he did not ever intend at the very beginning for it to become what it did. He started with a newsletter, a Christmas newsletter to his squadron. And in PT boats, guys were frequently in more than one squadron. They would get transferred around. So somebody who got the newsletter would write back and say, well, so-and-so was in this squadron. He'd like to get this newsletter too, so Daddy would add them. I guess maybe his biggest goal was to find every PT boat man. We couldn't do it, but we gave it like a 4.0 try. In the 60s, they were meeting in the bull sessions around, and they were big.
It stands for getting together and shooting a lot of bull. Presumably we were all telling the gospel truth.
It was like a network. One of the bull sessions actually became a reunion. First reunion, 1965, Los Angeles. That's the one that John Wayne came to. And he kissed my mother, and she never washed that cheek again.
Well, it was quite large because, you know, all those boys were still alive, and we had some pretty nice reunions. And you of course, met most all your friends because they were all still there. But today, when we hit our reunion, it's going to be a very small group.
The men who come here today and yesterday are happy to talk about it because this is probably the only few times that they do talk. We didn't talk about this when we came home. Talk about it. My kids didn't know what the hell I did. It really wasn't in our minds that this was something great. This was not a great crusade. It was just something you had to do. You were an American, so you had defended America.
I'm Catherine Hunt, and married to Don Hunt, PC boater, and we've been coming together since 1982.
We used to go roller skating almost every night.
Don had a buddy that he went to the roller rink with. I think Don had been wanting to meet me.
Well, she was a pretty good roller skater. She get out there and dance around on those roller skates. She was like about 16 years old.
I was wearing this real short skirt and thought I was pretty hot stuff, you know.
I told him, I said, you grab one arm and I'll grab the other and we'll just lift her off her feet. Well, we did, only he didn't. So Catherine and I both went sprawling on the floor.
And let me tell you, that was some crash down on the floor. And I hated him.
And that's how we met.
America goes to war. Men of the Army, Navy, and Marines reinforce the battlefronts on 6 continents to save the homes and ideals of free men from Axis domination.
When you go in the military, you don't go for the medals. You go because it's the thing to do. We went to enlist. I didn't pass the physical. I had a rupture. And then the gunnery sergeant said, you'll never survive the physical. Anyway, I got a job, saved up my money, got an operation. About 8 months later, I go to the post office, and he's not at his desk. Right close by him was a chief petty officer at his desk, and here was a sergeant, the Army sergeant, at his desk. I say, Chief, where's the gunnery sergeant? Oh, I don't know. He came in and went out. See, he doesn't report to me. I said, I don't know what he may never come back. He said, but come on over here. You can wait by me, and when he comes in, you can talk with him. Well, he was the best salesman I've ever met in my life. I enlisted in the Navy.
Well, it had been a couple of years the war had been going on, and that I just hated to see him go.
She wasn't too happy that I was leaving town by any means. She recognized the fact that that's the way it was. We were all going to do what we could do for this war effort.
And we finished boot camp in the middle of December, and we were told to go home and visit the family and come back in 10 days. Boy, that was lovely. So I said, well, I'll check my old girlfriend, she might be around. She was around, but she wasn't home. I spoke to her aunt who was raising her at the time. She's going to kill me for telling you this story. But I told the aunt who I was. She says, and I says, oh, how nice, you're home. I said, yes. I was wondering if Mary would like to go to the movies this evening. She said, yes, she would. Oh, I knew I had a friend there. And we took her out. And we came back from the movies. We sat down and talked about life and blah, 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 blah. When the sun came up, we were still talking. And one thing led to another, and she finally agreed to, we should get engaged. And yeah, it was, we were seeing things eye to eye. And so in order to stay there in Rhode Island, instead of torpedo men can go out with the fleet, go to submarines, or they could go to this new thing called PT boats.
The PT boat is a new type of craft, differing from other naval craft in many ways. It is a weapon of opportunity to be used in narrow passages, restricted water, and potential blocks. PT boats are small, fast, wooden craft. They are 80 feet long with a 20-foot beam and 6-foot draft. They pack 4,500 horsepower with a Sunday punch of 4 torpedoes, 4 50 caliber machine guns, and 1 20-millimeter cannon. Nothing must stand in the way.
At the time, they didn't know how big the PT boat program was even going to be. You know, are we going to have 3 squadrons, 4 squadrons, 100 squadrons?
They thought that people with small boat experience would be the best at this, and they sort of got hung up on getting people from New England who were good with sailboats and things.
Well, there were no PT boats during the beginning of the war. We hadn't had any. Because the PT boats were wooden construction, Many of the yacht builders previous to that were in business building yachts and pleasure craft and cruisers. The Navy went to some of these companies and said, you know, we're going to be building a certain specification. You are wooden boat builders and prominent wooden boat builders, and this is what we need to build.
When the war started, they're trying to pull all this together. So that whole first 6 months was building a base, building a curriculum, finding instructors, finding support staff for the base. This is from March of 42 through about September of 42. Let's put this together, figure it out, and adjust as necessary.
So we arrived there, and it was the first week of January. Bitter cold, and the barracks were unbelievably bad. And I don't think they had any heat in them at all.
The very first night that we was there, some of the guys, you could tell it how bad that they missed home. You'd hear some sniffling.
First month that they were there, it was pretty much all classroom. And it was a 2-month class course that they went to. And then the second half, the second month there, they were out on the boats.
I go through PT boats training in Melville, Rhode Island. That's a 2-month intensive course, learning to do the other things at the torpedoman. I could start the engines. I knew quartermaster and navigation. I radar. I was a gunner. So we had to learn these because in case somebody was wounded, somebody had to take over.
Many of the sailors were young when they were called to duty. They wouldn't become men until they were at war. Life on the training base was hard. To make things bearable, they found ways to entertain themselves, as Annie Gavel, the Garfield gunner, will tell you.
And I got in trouble down there too. You know, I came in late one night, and I lived in New Jersey, so it was close by. You know, I come from there and go down there, and I come back Monday morning, and naturally they held an inspection. You know, all of a sudden you got the guys coming in. You lived in Quonset huts, newspapers all around, and everything else, and all of this. All of a sudden I come in, I'm changing to get, you know, my uniform to get out, and hey, captain's mast. What the hell, captain's mast? Then when they read it off to me, they had me for urinating all around all the Quonset huts. I says, what do you mean urinating and all of this stuff? I go in there. So they're calling my name out. I'm standing there waiting to be shipped over to the West Coast to go to the Pacific to catch my squadron. And they say, hey, Andy Gavel, where are you? I say, hey, here I am, boys. I'm leaving. Goodbye. Go over. And there I go over to the Pacific.
Now I'm on my way overseas to be assigned to a PT boat.
There I am on a ship, my first ocean voyage. I'm going due west, zigzagging all the way. And 21 days later, we land in New Guinea. Man, it was quite an experience seeing all those crazy-looking natives down there in New Guinea.
The women were all naked all the time. I was watching, one of the women were having the baby right there, you know, squatting down and all, but you didn't fool around with the women, you know.
And then they'd come out with dugout canoes. And there'd maybe be 6, 7 in that big canoe. And they'd pull up next to us there, and boy, they had, their ears were pulled down, their nose had bones in their nose, they're all tattooed. They were really tough.
The natives in New Guinea liked bed sheets and pillowcases and smelly soap like Lifebuoy and Camay and things like that.
What they would do, trade for fruit with the natives, and what they traded was ice cubes. And the natives would just sit there and look at the ice cube melt, and I said, Daddy, that's terrible, that's mean.
And for one cigarette, they'd give you all the bananas you could carry. So we brought a ton of bananas back, and we give it to the tender. And the next time we went, maybe a week later, we went to the same town, they raised the price to a pack of cigarettes. They got smart to us.
My assignment comes through, they're going to put me on a PT tender as a radioman. On a tender. That's a ship, not a boat. It's a ship. Oh my God, my world crashed. So I report to the ship. And as I walk aboard, I said, could I talk with who's in command of the communications division? Yes. They sent for this chief. Man, he had hash marks right down here. I mean, the whole sleeve was like gold. He says, yeah, what do you want? I says, I want to transfer off of this ship because I'm supposed to be on a PT boat. He laughed at me. He says, no deal. He says, your request denied. I said, well, could I talk with the officer in charge of the communications division? He says, yes, you can, but you go with prejudice. I didn't know what that meant. I said, okay, that's good, that sounds good. And I get brought right to this ensign, another ensign, and I tell him what I'm going to do. He says, I have to deny your request. I says, okay. Sir, could I talk with the captain? He says, that is within your rights. He said, but you go with prejudice. That's what the chief said. That's what this guy said. Now I'm against the commanding officer of this ship. So I have to wait 2 days. And then I'm finally piped into his officer's quarters, He says, now I hear a strange thing. You've just been assigned to my ship and you want to get off my ship. I can't understand that. You haven't even met any of the crew yet. I said, well, I'm not supposed to be here, sir. Well, how do you figure that? I said, well, I went through radio school and PT boat school, and I'm supposed to be on a PT boat. He says, never forget that. He says, you're a gambler, aren't you? He says, well, I'm a gambler too. He says, I'll approve. I'll leave you 4 hours to go ashore to get somebody from a PT boat squadron to take you. So the captain's gig comes up. He takes me to this island. There ain't nobody on this island. I'm 4 hours. What do you want to talk with the seagulls? With that, a jeep comes out down the coast.
Sam would eventually find a PT boat. He had to convince his skipper to let him join Squadron 12.
I said, will you write down something so I can bring it back? He had a piece of brown, like a bag, like a grocery sack, a brown paper bag. He tore off a piece. Says, I want this man, West Pullen. Heaven just opened.
There's two different kinds of days when you're in the PT boats. The first day is when you're in the back areas, not doing much except getting the boat ready to go back on the rough duty work. And you're working 8-10 hours a day, but you're sleeping every night. The other action days would be when you were on the firing line. You normally would leave your base or your tender at about dusk, and you would be sent to a certain area to patrol up and down to make sure nothing was happening in your area. And they always sent 2 boats together, just in case.
Came in, about dawn, and probably had breakfast. Then we had to fuel the boat, and the gunner's mates had to clean all the guns, whether they were used or not, because we exposed them to the weather every night. So you got to sleep intermittently, and usually didn't go out the next night, but sometimes you'd go out 4 or 5 nights in a row.
We started the engines up, and we got a signal from the shore that, wait a minute, the commander of the squadron wants to pass one more word on to our captain that shouldn't go over the radio. So he gets on the boat, and he looks at the sailors, and the sailors look like they've been through the mill, and he says, how many nights in a row have you guys been out? And 2 or 3 guys said right away, we've been out 9 nights in a row, sir. Oh, geez, he says, shut this boat down and put these guys to bed, give them a rest. I'll get some of the boat to go.
It was cramped. It was 80 feet long. We filled every bunk and every space with a body. You go out on patrol, nobody slept below. Everybody slept up topside. Because if you hit anything, you were thrown into the water and you had a better chance of surviving.
And a lot of times with food, we didn't have much of in the galley, we only had a small refrigerator.
The coffee was awful. It was this condensed milk. And the milk,
It would pour out of the can like molasses. It was kooky strong. But what I was doing after I got a slug of it in my mouth was looking for a place to spit. And the chief said, "Sailor, you don't spit on the deck." I said, "Well, what I do? Swallow it." And he said, "Get used to it, sailor. They only make coffee one way in the Navy."
Oh yeah, we stayed pretty athletic. We did baseball, we did volleyball, we did whatever we could. A little bit of swimming.
Cards, we played cards. Pinochle, we wore the decks right out.
We're playing poker that night, so we're having the drinks, and he was drinking the most, Bosman. 5 o'clock in the morning, we got through playing poker. He stood up, he fell flat on his face and knocked him right out. And not Raisin Jack, that was bad too. And then the rice whiskey in the Philippines, that was wicked stuff too. I mean, your feet are off the air. I mean, you gotta have somebody walk you around the place the way it was. But hey, it kept us through the war, kept us alive, you had to have some entertainment, the way it was, that went on, But
when there was no action, our basic orders were very simple. There's nothing complex about our orders. Seek out the enemy and destroy him. And this is what we tried to do.
You were reacting on adrenaline. I was never scared for a long time because the action was fast and furious.
I've had young students say, "Weren't you scared?" My answer is, and it may sound strange, I think we were too scared to be scared. Didn't have time to be scared. You didn't think too much about it at that time.
There's two sides to every conflict. None of the boys knew what to expect from the Japanese. No one bothered to check that Japan hadn't lost a war in almost 400 years.
The Japanese are fighting a religious war for their emperor. That character is made up of a combination of religion, patriotism, and emperor worship that has no parallel among the civilized nations of the world. The soldier is taught from childhood that to die for the emperor is to become a god himself, and that to surrender is to bring disgrace upon himself and his family. The Jap who surrenders can never return to his home. As a result, the nation reveres war and idolizes its soldiers.
The battleships were taking our boat and other boats under fire over 5 miles away. And then they sent the destroyers in. They shot up star shells. They lit up the sea. You couldn't hide. Your speed was good, but and your smokescreen generator couldn't hide you because this was daylight. You could read a newspaper. And a PT boat is no match for a destroyer. No match. Japanese did not believe in taking prisoners. If you were taken prisoner, you were less than a human being because they followed the Bushido, and that was fight till the death. They were fierce fighters. They may have been short in stature, but boy, a gun equalizes a lot of stuff.
They were the most determined people that you ever ran into in any situation. We understood that some of them had been hopped up a little bit, and to die for the emperor was to go to heaven as far as they were concerned.
3 miles away, they opened up. Their first salvo bracketed the boat. Bracketed the boat means came in, the shells landed right alongside. You wonder, what in the hell are these Japs got that makes them so accurate? Meanwhile, they're leveling everything they have at you. So skipper says, shoot out the searchlight. And that's when our stern took a hit and killed one man. And we got the hell out of there.
the Japanese were just close to us. And we went to bed that night and kept our clothes on. The next morning, the cook got up and Charlie dropped the cluster. And one of them came in our tent under one of the officers, right between his legs and under his bunk, and split him all up in the backside.
There was 2 planes came over so fast and they dropped this bomb. We were standing out. We were in by shore, and they hit that boat that was by shore above, and that's all that shrapnel. That was bad. That was a bad situation. Never got a shot at him. Took right off.
The bullets, some of them cut the tanks. You know, we had 100-octane gas tanks. They cut the strap, and it must have been a tracer because there was burn marks. If it had been down that little teeny bit, I wouldn't be talking to you here now.
And the Philippine girls up there in the Philippines, what they would do would, you know, they'd wash our clothes, and you'd be stark naked, you know, under the well there, you know, and taking a shower and all. And this one day, what happens, there was a Jap plane that was on one of the islands, and they would sneak over a seaplane, and they would drop a bomb or 2, you know, and into the sun, you know, and it'd come over. And this time with General, you know, they called General Quarters, and I'm stark naked, you know, and I was a trainer on a 40 millimeter, and I'm running over. I had a cigar in my mouth, sat down in there, and with a hat on my hat, and balls ass naked, okay? And I'm over there sitting there. Holy crap, I said, you know.
I will never forget seeing a plane bomb a particular oil installation on Tacloban, which was the capital of Lady Gulf, and then get shot down. But before they were hit the water, they would aim for a landing ship. And there were troops on the deck, and they had these rope ladders, and the Higgins boats were waiting for them, and they'd be climbing down, getting in the Higgins boat, and the Higgins boat would bring them ashore. But there was an air raid, a red alert, and their Japs were in the sky. And our American pilots were going after them. And this Jap was wounded, and he just turned in, and he headed toward this troop ship with the American flyer coming down after him. The American flyer did not explode the pilot in the air. The Jap pilot hit the ship, and there were men on the deck. You would never forget that. Never forget that. And the ship sank in probably less than 10 minutes, and there were these guys in the flaming water. How the hell are you going to rescue them?
I mean, people think they didn't feel for them, but you couldn't get yourself upset when a person did get shot like that. If you fell apart, you had to keep your wits, otherwise the whole boat would go.
We lost a crew from the strafing and bombing of one Jap plane. We got a few men buried over there right now. One man survived, and his whole back was full of metal, and he survived. He's the only one out of the whole crew.
There was one boat that was completely blown up, and a couple of my buddies was on the end.
You're going to do your job, and you know you've got to do it, and you're not going to let anybody down. And you know they're right alongside of you. And that's what you had there. You knew they could help you, and you knew you could help them. And that's what must make you feel like you can live it out.
You go take a shower and cool off and sit down and think, well, I better write something to them, and just to make sure that they knew you were still alive. I guess that was the major thing. And you just write funny things, you know. Maybe I love you, and boy, will we have a time when we get married and all of that, you know. So.
Back home, the women were adjusting to life without the men. The country was doing whatever it could to help out the war effort. Life was changing. And as the men sacrificed their lives, the nation wondered how this would all end.
I don't think he ever asked me to marry him, but he'd say when we get married or when we do get married, you know. I tell you, we girls got so tired of girls because all the men were gone, all of our men were gone. But we go out and have a drink and dinner, and but this time I'm all of 19, and we'd dress up and pretend to be 21 so we could have a drink. Well, it was very sad for us. Many nights I'd cry myself to sleep, but then I worked at the phone company, as I said, and the next morning you get up and get dressed and you go to work, you know, and I wasn't the only one. There were so many of the girls.
During those early dark days of World War II, the people back home were looking for something good to happen, and it wasn't happening in the beginning. The Japanese were running rampant in the Pacific. The Germans were doing the same thing. We were really, in the beginning, we were getting beat after Pearl Harbor, and we needed something to build our morale. These PT boats were just the perfect thing to do that with. They were a small boat, a David and Goliath type of thing, the big guy against the small guy, and here's the small guy throwing a rock, and he's winning. And I think the people really enjoyed that.
We were not winning in the beginning. And the people back home needed to know that their men were fighting a good fight and winning.
Well, there were many heroes. I don't consider myself one by any means, a stretch of the imagination, but there were many, and I know a lot of them.
They could do the job and would do the job, and they wouldn't run if you put them in a place and say, you've got to hold this area. They would stay there. They'd still be there. They're not going to turn and run.
We were supposed to have air protection. And when we were going back, we looked up there and saw all these planes up there. They said, don't shoot, there are planes. But it turned out to be Japs. When they peeled off, they started coming down, and there was 38 of them that we counted. And we shot down 4 of them that we know we shot down.
We were making a run on a Jap destroyer, you know, and I was the torpedo man. And I used to drain once in a while the alcohol from it. You needed alcohol to run these things, you know. And we had a cook on there, and we had a little stove, you know, and he'd run it off as we called it Pink Lady, 110 proof. And all of a sudden, this thing goes down. The skipper asked me, he says to me, Andy, what happened? Gee, I don't know. I forgot to put alcohol in the damn thing. It's a wonder we won the war, you know.
One night we were on patrol, and at first when we went out there, the Japanese were scared of smoke screens. They would not go through a smoke screen.
When you do that, you are obscured from the enemy because he doesn't know where in that smoke you are. And that was one of the reasons we were able to get out. But what the smoke screen generator do, it jammed. Now it's leaving a continuous smoke. It's like a tail. It's like someone pointing a finger. And they were just shooting ahead of the smoke. That didn't work. Fortunately, we had an officer on board who was very smart, and he took a hatchet and he cut the straps that held the smoke screen generator to the stern, and it fell off into the water, and then the Japs started shooting at the water, and we got the hell out of there. Smart.
Well, it was our duty for the country and everybody, you know, after a while, you know what you're fighting for.
You'll learn about Ollie Schneiders and how he, alone on his 146 boat, crept the boat up this very narrow stream. They could feel the trees and the bushes on each side, and they couldn't see anything in the cove, but they had this Japanese-American soldier there as an interpreter, and they said to him, call out and ask where we should tie up our barge, a PT boat. And he did, and then the lights went on. oh, there were barges all along in this shore. And the skipper says, open fire. You know, we made a mess of that place. We could see the oil tanks, gasoline tanks exploding 10 miles away when we scattled that, get the hell out of there. But that one river, the Pooley River, was always a bad spot. And we decided we were going to try to do something about it.
We were crazy heroes. Let's put it that way. We were crazy for doing what we did, but we did it. And we did what we were asked of. We killed.
It was hard for me for a long time. And I never did get hardened per se. Some guys was there, so they really was looking to go out and I never was that. If it came, I'd take care of business.
Most of the time would catch barges was loaded with troops, and we'd shoot them up, and we would just blow them all to hell. And just how brutal that thing really was. And I don't believe that people today realize what that was all about. I know some of these other wars were pretty nasty, and none of them are very good. But they're all different than this particular one. We were in Manila Bay, and we caught a barge in there, and we shot him up, but we really got a good close look at it. And there were no freeboard at all. The boat was absolutely leveled. And what was left in there, the keel and so on, there was blood about yay deep and so on. Pieces of guys in there, soldiers that we had shot up. And you know, when you think about it, they were human beings also. That's just how brutal it was. And I think the world needs to know that.
The sailor on that boat reached down to lend a hand to one of the floating Japs who was floating on a debris from his vessel. It was a wooden spar of some size, and it's like a buoy, you know. My sailor didn't know this, but the Jap had a rifle. And as the kid leaned over the side to hold it, to lend his hand, the Jap shot him right through here.
Everybody in the war was a hero. And the real heroes are the guys that got killed. They've lost everything. We all came back and got married, had families. They didn't. They gave it all. When you see these white crosses, they're the heroes.
We had a lot of 17, 18-year-olds who turned out to be damn good sailors. And you wouldn't think anybody that young would be able to take the responsibility they did. How many 17-year-olds today would you want to put in charge of a gun to keep you out of trouble?
It wasn't all bad. There was some nice days when it was very pretty, very nice. And it was a nice shallow place where we were tied up or anchored, and sandy bottoms, and we had a little diving helmet. One of these, it's a brass thing, and it has a plate that comes down over your chest, and it had a hose that went up, and somebody up on deck would pump this thing and provide air down below. Now, you were rather limited as how far you could down, but most of the time, if it was shallow enough, you could walk around, and it was coral, and the coral was piled in different places, and the most beautiful fish. It was like one huge fish tank watching all these beautiful fish. It was quite a thing to go diving and see this sort of thing.
It was really great, though. It was, you know, it was worth $1 million, but I wouldn't give $1 million to go there back again.
There were some bad times, but the fun times was there also. And of course, most of us look at the fun times.
It was necessary. I wish I had been able to do more, but I don't want to kill people.
We are now prepared to destroy more rapidly and completely every productive enterprise the Japanese have in any city. We shall destroy their docks, their factories, and their communications. Let there be no mistake. We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war.
The war was now turning. With victory on the horizon, testing different strategies would eventually lead to the unthinkable.
The American military man had something, I think, that most of our enemies never had. It's the ability to change tactics when the tactic you're using isn't working. The ones I remember in Lady Gulf, we were getting raided almost every hour. And you could see that as the day progressed, there were fewer and fewer Japs coming over. The fleet was out in the bay, and they had heavy caliber guns. They can reach higher in the sky. So they were taking a toll, plus the American pilots were taking a toll of the Jap fighter pilots. At that time, Japan had lost a lot of its good trained pilots. Midway took a big toll on them, and the war in the Pacific was not going in their direction. And they were losing caliber pilots. Well, we were getting experience too, so we were getting better.
That's when I got in my other squadron, in Squadron 40 then. We got over there, and what I heard, is that we were going to invade.
Every armed force was contemplating moving up into Japan to fight them on their own land. And the Army, the Navy, the Marines, everything was concentrating into a funnel condition, and everybody was going to go up. And we would have lost a million men. We would have. That's not just my opinion. That's governmental estimate.
They came down and they were taking bets that the war would be over in 2 weeks. And we say, how do you know? Well, we don't know, but there's something's going to happen that it's going to be over. Oh man, everybody's pretty joyous about it, but you knew darn well because all the preparation for the invasion was still taking place.
I never figured the war was ever going to get over, the way things were going. But the Japs weren't, the way my experience in assaultment, they weren't going to give up until every single one of them was dead.
And then Harry dropped the bomb. Harry dropped the bomb, and that was the end of the war for everyone. Thank God.
America waited out World War II's last tense hours. At the White House, President Truman, State Secretary Burns, and Cordell Hull stood by for the momentous surrender message from the Japanese. Radio men, sound and camera crews of worldwide newsreels kept vigil with Washington reporters. Then, after tantalizing hours of rumors and guesses, came the President's historic announcement, August 14th, 1945.
I have received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government in reply to the message forwarded to that government by the Secretary of State on August 11th. I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration.
The tender broke out all the beer.
Everybody was hollering.
Yes. There was a keg of beer there, and the skipper of one of the boats opened the tap, and he got the first. And somebody said, that beer's not too good. He says, there's no such thing as bad beer. He says, some is better than the other. What a character.
And then I can remember also when we found out, well, we're still going to the Pacific, even though the war's over. All those islands have little bays and things, and we'd go into a bay with a white flag and go ashore with a white flag. And explain to them that the emperor has surrendered. These were his terms of surrender. This was the date of it and so forth. And then you'd ask him, well, may I have your sword? And if he gave you his sword, that was the surrender. And you didn't need anything else.
We traced our steps, we're back up to Scotland, and gave our boats to the Russians. under that Lend-Lease program that was in effect then. And the Russians wouldn't accept the boats until we put 3 brand new V12 Packard Marine 1,550 horsepower engines in each boat, and make sure that everything was on our inventory was there, you know.
The Russians are very persnickety about being sure they got everything that they should have. We'd say, well, you know, Captain, here you've got 2 of these and you're supposed to have 1 of those. Ah, yes, that's very good. Where is the pickle dish? We had to send down to Exeter, England, and get a 6-inch old plastic pickle dish or something as close to it as possible, and they shipped it back up, and then he accepted that.
Skipper of my boat was born and raised in New Jersey, where I was. We used to gather up on the bow at night. We used to sleep on deck, away from the pier, away from the trees, where we were safe from mosquitoes out there. And he said, "Red, what are you going to do when you get out of the Navy?" I said, "Well, get a job, start to make money." No, he says, "You're not going to do that." He says, "You're going to go finish your high school." Okay. He said, "Oh, when you finish high school, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I go get a job now. I've got a high school diploma, whatever, blah, blah, blah." "No, you're not going to do that. You're going to go to college. You're going to use the GI Bill, and it'll pay for your college. And that's what you'll do. Promise me you'll do that." I said, "Okay, I promise you." He says, "Now, what are you going to do after you got out of college?" "Get a job." He says, "Yeah, but you know who you're going to call? You're going to call me." He says, "I'm going to hire you. So I want you to work for me."
So I immediately called to my parents' house because my wife had moved over to live with my parents while I was gone. And she was all excited, but she would have to wait until my father got home with the car. Because, you know, gas was very rationed during the war, very serious rationing. And so, sure enough, they finally got there. And we did one of those honey and dairy things in the middle of this big reception hall. And here comes my father with this big 9-month-old kid. He must have weighed about 40 pounds. But he's got this big kid. I almost fell through the floor.
I was to report back to Boston in the Fargo building. And on the way across, why I had my 30-day leave. And that's how when I got married, it was on the way across. It was exciting.
I wore a blue suit, just a plain suit, and he had a neat suit. He wore his Navy outfit. He looked really handsome.
Life was just different for years and years and years after that, because I didn't know I was for a while. I didn't know where I was belonged. I came back home a real basket case for about 3 years, because they said, well, I wasn't ever going to get married because I just didn't feel, it just tore me up. I didn't feel worthy, and I didn't because in the scriptures, I can tell you there's a lot of places in there that says, "Thou shalt not kill."
Back in the Philippines, they stripped all the boats down.
And they were stripped because the war was over and they were of no more value.
You can't save a wooden boat very long.
You know, they take all the armament off and push them up on the beach and hit them with a flamethrower.
And I kind of felt sad about it, because those boats did a great job for us. And those of us that are still alive, when that happened, why, we felt bad.
The ensign at that time thought he had the last flag that flew on the boat. So he took the flag down and he packed it up. So now I had a spare flag. What I did after the officer went ashore, I put my flag up, paid my respects, took the flag down, and I took it home. I still have the flag, and like I tell my son, when I'm cremated, I want that flag cremated with me.
Oh, this is an unusual reunion because it's the last one, and it has elements in it not experienced in past reunions. Not the least of which, and the hardest for us, is the acceptance that we won't see these men again.
Boats Newberry held 46 consecutive reunions. Year after year, the men would rekindle their friendships and reminisce about life as a PT boater.
They became extremely close. I would say in many, many cases closer than brothers. And they just wanted to keep in touch. They didn't want to lose that brotherhood that they had developed, and that to bring that back, to be able to remember it with somebody who was there is vital.
It's fun, you know, particularly when we were younger. You know, we really had some parties, had some good times, and you'd see guys you hadn't seen for a while, and, you know, kind of got acquainted again with them. You know, and most of us, when we came back from the service, we just flew to the four winds and went about our business of creating a life for ourselves.
Reunions were always good. We have a small meeting on Saturday morning, and the rest is all fun and games, I say.
It means you can loosen up and tell it like it is, because when I first come home from the service, any type of war show, period, I don't care what it was, I would never go and see it.
There's one commonality that I notice when talking to these guys, when they're talking about actions that they took or, you know, chances that they took. There's two things they don't talk about, and if they do, they openly weep. And that's hard to look at, but it says a lot about them as human beings. They never talk about, oh yeah, there was a whole bunch of Japs and I just sawed them up with the 50. They never talk about how they hated the enemy or killed the enemy. They talk about it, I did my duty, I did what I had to do.
I have seen guys who had not seen each other for 50 years spot each other. It's very emotional. They get choked up, I get choked up. You know, it's really, really something to see.
One of my best friends came marching down the hall, and I said, Bob Riley, is that you? And he said, yeah, and he recognized me right away.
And I thought, Jesus, 50 years. Am I going to know anybody? I went into a room like this here, was their big room, and all the guys were standing around, different ones, and then I was looking to see if I could find somebody that I knew, you know. And I looked over yonder there, and I saw two, naturally, tall guys that were taller than me, naturally. And every time I'd look at them, they were looking over my direction. I'd look away at over someplace else to see if I saw them, and every time I'd look back that way, they were looking at me. And finally, they came over to me and they says, "Why, Shorty, where the hell have you been?"
It was in 1982 in Denver. These three fellows came up to me, three PT boaters, and they said, "You're the one," and it kind of scared me. "You're the one," and I said, what? And he says, "Your name's Hunt, Ron 21. Where's Don?" And I said, "Well, he's at work." And he said, "Well, get him here." And I did.
There's a spirit that's developed that if you served on the boats, you're a great guy, and we found more evidence of that in the reunions.
People, when they have the auctions, say for the champagne, you get the champagne, you get to drink it, you get the 2 glasses, but you got to return the box that the glasses came in. The box was made by Terry Hughes, who is on the board. He's a splinter, and he took the wood from one of the boats. But I've seen it go up to $800. I've seen it go up to $1,500. I've seen it go up to $1,200. And the person that pledged that money said, "Throw it back. Start the bids again." So it's like acts of generosity, which is incredible.
It pales in comparison to the story you're about to hear about a dozen men, all in their 70s, who spent 15 years restoring an 80-foot speedboat, one of the most historically significant boat projects ever undertaken, and the last one of its kind.
It's hard to miss the arrival of PT Boat 658. You will hear it coming long before it emerges as more than just a dot on the horizon yards. Yet despite the number built, only a handful exist today, and only one is a running, floating original. People who tour the decks of 658 see and feel a very sturdy, beefy mini warship. Its bulkhead substantial, its rigging strong. It is a Spartan machine as you look down the unembellished deck, past all the armament, and you know its single purpose: inflict heavy damage on the enemy. And while today it accurately reflects the memories of the vets who trusted their very lives to this sturdy little PT, had you seen it 15 years ago, you would have given boarding a second thought.
We brought it up from San Francisco Bay, and it was a mess when we got it.
It was obvious from the get-go that it was going to take a great deal more from the pooled veterans than just financial contributions. Dick Lau, a veteran who survived a suicide plane attack on the PT boat he served on, found that his retirement took a decidedly different direction with the arrival of PT 658 in Oregon.
Being retired, I didn't have a lot of commitments so I had time to work on it, and then got started and couldn't stop.
During the restoration of PT 658, the boat was beached, it sank, it even caught on fire. Undaunted with all these setbacks, the veterans continued. And with the bad came some good, too.
When we first started that first engine, we didn't have it in the boat yet. We were going to turn it over. Well, that sucker turned over twice and away she went. We're honest, Mother, we didn't know it was going to run.
17 years from the time they started on that dock in San Francisco to the christening of the boat in 2005, the PT boat has fueled the dreams of veteran and enthusiast. And it has seen the passing of nearly half of the original 12 who started the project.
When we started in on this job, there was all kinds of people that said that boat will never be back in the water again. So it does our hearts good to see the thing underway and know that those people were wrong.
The men in Portland performed the improbable, but one man did the impossible at the 1985 reunion. Boats Newberry saved the PT boat legacy by raising $300,000 to restore an original PT boat. He finally found his dragon lady.
Oh, my father was never content. No. He always wanted to do one more thing, make one more thing better on the boat, add this, add that to the boat, improve something, buy another book. No, he was never content. He wanted it to keep growing. It just mushroomed. It just was a gradual thing, step by step, larger and larger bull sessions. And then they just kind of wanted to all get together centrally. So from there, it just gradually increased. And then like I said, the largest one was 1,300 people, and that was so big because of the dedication of the second boat.
I'm going to start with that, and all of our ladies. I think this is one of the most auspicious occasions that we have had in all our long history since 1939, when PTs were first started on the torpedo boats. I have been told to make my remarks short. Therefore, I'm going to curtail my tongue. On the other hand, I cannot help but say that for every single one of us here today, this boat, as it is now finished, represents our heart's desire and our hopes and aspirations from World War II and from the years between during peace.
My father didn't live to see that, but he knew that it was there, almost ready to be dedicated when he died. And so for the next one, they made, I guess, a special point of being there because his ashes were going to be thrown over, tossed over the side.
Now we can have a few words.
A few words,
too? A beautiful ceremony.
Thank you for coming.
And I'm sure that Dad is listening.
He's looking down.
He's with us in spirit, not in body. This is the culmination of a great desire of his to christen the Dragon Lady. It exceeded even our faintest expectations that it would come out as well as it did.
In the name of the United States of America, and in memory of all those men who served on motor torpedo boats, and especially a very good friend of Newberry, who inspired all of us to keep that memory alive, I rechristen you, Dragon Lady.
The memorial services have been something that they've always done. Is to recognize the sailors that have passed in the last year, or perhaps that they just found out about. They've been doing these reunions for 46 years, and they've always, liked to recognize the fact that somebody did a service and somebody passed away.
It really hurts each year when they read out those names, because there's always at least one or two that you knew personally.
Admiral Kemnada, Admiral John D. Bulkley, and Mr. Jack Fallon.
And oh boy, there are a lot more than that you have met through the years at these reunions. And it's always sad.
They have a term called the last patrol. And basically the last patrol is the last one you do until you do another. So at night, that's when the PT boats went out, generally, and you're on your last patrol. Well, when you've served your last patrol, you're done. And that's an analogy of when a PT boater passes away. They've done their last patrol.
We had some very, very good friends that we've lost through the years. And of course, a lot of it, there's sickness and stuff as it comes with getting older. And of course, you know that you're not going to be here forever either. But it really hurts each year.
The ones who never were to a reunion in the past will miss this type of camaraderie. It's a bond between men facing the same threats.
I think there's a certain sadness, but life goes on, and we'll all go back home and brag a little bit.
I've been coming to them for years, and it's somebody you just love the people, good friends. You write them letters.
Well, I know that they are over, so people say. Don't forget the guys who were there and paid with their lives.
It was not a love. No matter how they died heroes.
Never has a generation given so much, sacrificed so honorably, and fought so courageously for the cause of freedom, and did so much for their country after they came home from the war. Today, we remember them.
I'm going to try to read these names with all the reverence we can bring together. Joe Callahan, Ron 21 and 35. William C. Calloway, Ron 11.
Donald F.
Edward
Myers,
T. Cam, Ron 1.
AGP 12,
William D. Hutchinson, AGP 5 and base 17. Ray Carroll, Ron 9 and base 21.
C. Charles Jackson Jr.
Edward Frank Cartier, Ron 40, base
Fred
5
L.
and
Jackson,
17.
Ron 24,
MTBRTU.
4 and 25.
Dominic
Douglas
Catrembo, Ron 19.
Ron 29. James B. Jarvis.
Andrew Joseph Galvin, Ron 12.
It was just like a big family, and everybody meant something to each other.
Well, I hope we meet again somewhere. The land of the living instead of the land of the dying.
To finish this up on the battleship Massachusetts, to be able to, make a statement like they did today, with the whole conclusion of the PT boats, and for that to be the last part, it's quite an impact.
There's something romantic about PT boats. I think that impressed us all back then. It was like a leader fighting a war against interminable odds and winning. And every time I see a boat moving fast through the water, I think, oh boy, there goes my boat. You don't forget those things. And if you start to think about it, just start to count the good things that happened to you by being in this country. And sometime, maybe you'll be confronted with the need to pay back.
Every generation has its thing, and ours happened to be a war.
My generation is doing the best it can not to repeat the mistakes that were made before.
Where are you going to find men that have this kind of knowledge in common? They're not walking the sidewalks. They're not out there. They're on some dusty shelf somewhere.
I'm real proud, as I said, that they turned out to be such fine citizens. And I guess it was the greatest generation because we were hardworking and came out of a depression, and now that we raised our children, we probably tried to give them too much.
We will continue to talk about PT boats until there is no one left. And then, like other historical figures, it will just drift into oblivion somewhere. I don't know. Somebody will remember, oh, we used to do something with what were those small boats that we had? Oh, yeah. Oh, PT boats, that's what they were, I appreciate, Danny, you're taking time to hear some of these stories. I think what I've told you is 99.9% accurately true to the final period. Sometimes I don't remember everything. Sometimes I have short-term memory loss. My grandchildren say, Grandpa, you didn't call, the last time you told us that story, it didn't end that way. Shut up.